I'm going to start off with the bottom line. Here's the bottom line. There are 5 tech trends that are keeping everybody really busy. Not just security, not just the IT department, but also the privacy experts at your companies. The first is you've got the tablet issue. So it's not a phone, it's not a laptop, it's not a desktop, it's this mobile device which enables awesome productivity for all of the employees at your company, but it creates new and unique challenges because you've got your corporate data, access to your corporate data, client files, all on this very portable piece of equipment, and not a lot of enterprise management tools exist today to really help you manage that equipment. So you've got this great chasm crossing where people can really, truly work with a lot of functionality anytime, any place, but then you've got this whole problem, this unique issue about enterprise management where that hasn't really kept up with some of the things that we've come to get used to on the desktop. The next phrase, we've kind of coined this phrase here at the office, BYOD. It's without CYA, which creates BYOB. So if you kind of play a little play on acronyms here on the alphabet soup, think about this. The bring your own device work without having a good strategy for covering your assets creates a bring your own booze to the office party after work as you commiserate about some of your challenges. And again, just like we just talked about with the tablets, you now have this situation where we know from recent studies and surveys that people don't treat these personal devices like a supercomputer in their pocket. And they're not thinking about strong passwords on the devices. They haven't set up auto wipe features. And when they lose the device, it's their personal device with corporate data on it. They don't think about calling you first. They think about calling their service provider and shutting off access first, even though your data is still sitting on it. So we've got a real issue because we don't have the right cover your asset strategy around the BYOD. Then the next thing is big data analytics. And, you know, big data analytics is going to be a critical and vital piece of your overall technology strategy. You're going to need it not only to help your company make revenue, but from a security standpoint, you're going to need it to be able to analyze trends and think heuristically about how do I try and stay either a step ahead or in lockstep with cyber criminals. You need it, but there's a lot of promises out there and not a ton of delivery. So behind the big data analytics, you still need a couple key resources. And in my opinion, they got to be rock stars. So even though you have big data perhaps in place in your company, you still need an amazing person or team of people who can actually do an appropriate data map architecture for you, really thinking through those digital assets that absolutely must be protected. You know, if you think about Secret Service and how they protect the president, right? There's 3,000 staff plus that are supporting the president. And the Secret Service has to be focused on continuity of government, which means protecting the president and the vice president. Just because I happen to be around the president doing my job doesn't mean I'm going to be protected the same way the president is. You can't focus on every digital asset that you have. It's the same thing in your company. So you've got to be able to identify what are those 1 or 2 assets that need most of your focus and attention. So you still need those rock stars helping you think through data mapping architecture as well as the logistics and the analytics that go behind that data. Without those key resources, big data analytics is just a bunch of big data. The next piece is we've got a new 4-letter word at the office, and you may have heard it, and if not, feel free to use it at your office, and that's called SMIT. Basically, social media information technology. We are seeing this as one of the biggest gaps right now, not only in acceptable usage policies, which could create real brand issues for you, but we're seeing it create a real opportunity for the corporate jewels to be exposed. I'll give you an example. And I don't mean people clicking on links and doing goofy things on Farmville, creating a virus in the network. Those are things you already know about. I'm talking about not really thinking about the information that's posted online. Quick example, customer. has major technology delivery for a lot of firms, okay? So think service provider of technology. Their staff, incredibly talented. Their resumes on LinkedIn, incredibly detailed, down to the Passion operating system level. In 6 man-hours, my group and I were able to start with LinkedIn, fan out to all the support boards, fan out to social media, and make a really good guess at the enterprise architecture, location of servers, operating systems, patches, routers, how things were set up, the dev environment, the test environment, the production environment. Now, we know data centers, so we have an upper hand on most of your kind of common run-of-the-mill cyber criminals, but the fact remains is that we have not kept pace with our policies, how we talk about social media, and then how the corporate jewels are actually put at risk. And then the last piece, I'm talking about how the cloud could turn out to be your father's Oldsmobile. You know, a lot of talk about the cloud. There's a lot of benefits about moving to the cloud. You get, leverage somebody else's resources. You get a cost play. Sometimes you get capabilities you just do not have time to bring in-house and integrate into the enterprise. But really, truly, a lot of these cloud services, when we get under the hood of this shiny Ferrari, we're finding your father's Oldsmobile. So those are 5 tech trends that we are seeing across, consistently across all of our clients. It's giving you headaches, and hopefully we can give you some practical advice that you can move forward with. You know, one thing that may help you, I thought this was a great stat. This is from Chris Byrne, who talked about this at the Gartner Security and Risk Summit. And basically, he identified the fact that most organizations, and yours is probably, in this category, have less than 3% of their total staff focused on risk and security. Gartner finds that staffing levels should be between 5 to 12%. So if you're feeling stretched a little thin, do some math. That may be why. So what do you need and what do your clients need? What we're seeing is obviously the risk assessment. And the risk assessment needs to change. We're seeing that, it's not just kind of the traditional questions we've been asking in the past, but we're seeing that with cloud services as well as your service provider outsourcing some of the pieces before they deliver something to you, that there's a real muddiness in understanding sort of that whole transparency in your supply chain. And so a risk assessment that thinks about, it's not just one degree of separation with your service provider, it's who's also doing the work for them or doing the work with them to provide you the service. Real situational awareness. I know a lot of you have tons of tools that you're integrating into, kind of an integrated dashboard. But as you know, real situational awareness isn't just the things hitting you. What's hitting your neighbor? What's hitting across the globe? And being able to kind of put that in a place where you can actually turn it into actionable intelligence. We already talked a little bit about social media and mobile adding additional points of weakness. I am seeing 100% across the board where even if the policies and procedures of the company have been updated, they are not comprehensive enough in this area. And then cloud, as I said before, I've actually seen at companies where they have much better business continuity, disaster recovery, and security than they did before because they're not typically staffed in the technology department to provide this. But then, depending on how you use it, you may be creating other security issues. So how do you position yourself and your executives to tackle the issue? Well, I think the first thing you need to do, and of course Black Hat's going on right now this week, but last year Black Hat, what was interesting was we've changed the security dialogue, and I think for the better. So it used to be you'd sit around and you'd hear people, especially people who've been in the industry a long time, and if you were talking about different threats and different breaches, there was a little bit of an attitude of, well, if you were breached, someone there should be fired because you're incompetent. And what I realized last year is the security dialogue has changed, I think, for the better. And if you kind of take this perspective with you as you look at your architecture and infrastructure, I think it will help you a lot. So, current reality, you are compromised, and if you're not, you're going to be. And assume all devices that talk to you are dirty. So if you remember at the beginning where I kicked it off, you've got these tablets, you have these personal devices that are now on a BYOD strategy, and then you have your corporate issued. And if you assume all of them are compromised, let's go back to your presidential and vice presidential data assets. If you think about all of those being compromised, how do you treat those two assets? Maybe you monitor them a little differently. Maybe you pay attention to who's downloading those particular assets. Maybe you have stricter controls around your vendors who have access to those one or two digital assets. So think about the fact, just assume it's all compromised, and if that's the case, how do you take care of your number one and number two digital assets? You'll sleep a lot better at night, folks, if you get that kind of focus. Just a quote here. This is from Mark Weatherford. He's a fairly new Deputy Undersecretary over at DHS. And this was his perspective this year at RSA. And basically his perspective is, despite all the firewalls, despite all the layered defenses, we're still not keeping the bad guys out. So again, assuming that they're in, how do you protect your digital assets? And then in the news, we're talking cybersecurity legislation. And so the question is, are more laws the answer? Well, first of all, let's do a little history lesson. We've had a decade go by and not had a substantial piece of cybersecurity legislation passed. I'm not casting aspersions on leadership or parties. I'm just stating the facts. No new laws in 10 years. Do we need to rush the current laws on the books in place? I'll leave that up to you to decide. A couple of things I want you to pay attention to as businesses, though, and make sure you're speaking up, is based on the Hill's perspective on we need to be faster in notifications. We need to do more for victims of data breaches. We need to do a better job of, sticking to and implementing current standards. Just make sure your voice is heard as a business, that if you think the frameworks and the standards and the notification requirements are going to break your pocket, break that wallet, you need to speak up. I don't believe that there is a firm appreciation for how difficult it is in the middle of an incident to pick your head up and start telling everybody when you're trying to figure out what happened. You're trying to do triage. Can you imagine a doctor in the emergency room having to go out and do press updates to the press? I mean, that's what's happening to you. If some of the language in some of these bills get passed, that's what's going to be happening to you. You're going to be in the middle of an incident with people requiring you to do notification. So let's make sure we don't err on the side of, gosh, we've done nothing for a decade, and we end up going too far and creating an undue burden on businesses. And instead of getting the bad guys out, doing the triage and saving the patient, you're too busy doing reporting. So I just say, I leave it up to you. I put a few sample acts up here that you can look at, some of the legislation. Read it for yourself. We're actually, we are reading all 212 pages of the new Cybersecurity Act. I put a few comments out yesterday, and we'll continue as we continue to read it, understand it, talk to lawyers, and get a perspective on this. We will continue to keep you updated. Okay, so what are we up against? There's a fabulous report that I'll talk about in a minute, but if you haven't read this Wall Street Journal editorial by Mr. McConnell, Mr. Chertoff, and Mr. Lin, I highly encourage you get it. And it talks about China's cyber thievery is national policy and must be challenged. And so I call this the carbon monoxide of security issues. It's silent and deadly, and most firms don't know what's going on until they get a knock at the door from the FBI saying, hey, 20 years of your intellectual property looks like it went out the door. So make sure you read this article. China is not the only country doing it, and I am not picking on China, but it is a reality. So if you could please take a look at this report, I think you will find this report very helpful for you as you build your business cases for changes that you want to make to your policies and procedures at the office. This report actually is one of the best unclassified reports available to the public. It was put out by the Office of the National Counterintelligence Executive. It was a report to Congress. The victims are identified, and the findings from the digital forensics are reviewed in this report. I think we'll find it enlightening, a little scary, but very helpful as you put together your plans. And then lastly, I just want to talk to you about the tsunami warning, and then we're going to go into some Q&A here. The tsunami warning is this, and I talked about this a little earlier. Social media and this amazing generation that's coming out of school and working for us now and in the future, the netizens, the Gen Y, the digerati, they love to multitask and they love to be online and they love social media. If you have not addressed and helped them figure out how to use it smartly to enhance your business, you're going to run into some serious issues. Give you another example. We had a firm. The firm was basically missing out on bids against their competitors. And they were convinced that either they had somebody on the inside sharing data with the competitors or they had something going on. And they were talking about maybe interrogating employees, et cetera. And so we were in there doing something else when we heard this issue going on. And they said, well, do you mind if we do some open source intelligence and see if we can figure out what's going on? And basically what we figured out is because this company actually had a strategy of be out there, be on social media, join everything, be vocal, we want eyeballs on us. You literally had two issues going on. The first is you had a physical security issue. A lot of young ladies working for them who met with a lot of clients by themselves. I literally showed them for one of the young ladies. I understood her behavior patterns Monday through Sunday. I knew where, when she got up, when she rode her bike, when she went running, when she went to the office. I knew where she was having drinks, et cetera. And I said, you're creating a real physical security issue here because all you said was be out there. You didn't give them guidelines on how to be out there safely. The second piece is you had employees talking about, I'm working on a secret project. You had employees saying, I'm not going to say who I'm meeting with, but I'm going to be meeting with a client. I'm so, stoked, or I'm psyched, or I'm pumped. And you basically had a life in the day of the entire company out there on social media. And I said, look, you don't need insider threat and you don't need your competitor doing anything illegal. You've already given away the corporate jewels. So giving you that example, again, go back, look at those social media usage policies that you have. If you haven't written any, it's time to start slow, and then just continue to watch and modify those as you go. And then you all know this, but I think this is a great slide for you to talk to your senior leadership about. And the fact that, it's not the IT's job anymore to do security. It's everyone's. And when you sit down, I would recommend you read that counterintelligence report, do an executive summary sort of in your firm's words, your strategy, et cetera, and get that in front of your communications people, your finance people, procurement, legal counsel, risk and operations. Start bringing them into this kind of fact-finding, data-finding. Start helping them connect the dots. And then the other thing I recommend, and I think firms learn a lot about themselves this way, dedicate a staff meeting and say, hey guys, I'd like to dedicate a staff meeting to a data breach. Make up a horrible scenario, pretend those top two assets are gone or on the front page of, the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and whatever other papers are important to your company, and practice for an hour what you would do. I had one client we facilitated this for, and we all looked at the lawyer for 35 minutes because the lawyer kept telling us, you can't do that, you can't do that, you can't do that. Well, good thing it was an exercise, right? Who would want to be doing that during the real deal? So at this point, and I do have a guide. It's written for consumers, but a lot of the work that's in here can also be applied to your business. We've got a lot of free tools that we talk about in here and a lot of exercises in here. And Drew did mention the book at the beginning, so you do have a guide. And then lastly, here's some different ways you can reach out to us. If there's something you heard today that you want to follow up on or ask a question, or even if you've got a different opinion. We always like to hear different opinions from the field. These are ways you can reach us. Also on our website, we've got an executive checklist with 7 sort of steps to a safer existence. So if you want to check that out, it's free, and you can come and get that at the website.